All right, here we are. Looking good,
Cool.
feeling good.
Yes.
Back to live stream mode. It's been a
Love
few
it.
years. Has it
I
been?
know. Like a year.
Has it only been
But
a year?
when did we stop? We were doing it. I was in Hawaii, I think, most of that year, right?
Yeah, probably like
2021.
yeah, maybe a little over a year. Has it
Yeah.
been maybe a little over a year since we stopped?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Actually, and I should let me just pop over since we're kind of new at this or refreshing at it. Let me make sure that this is actually all working and streaming out to YouTube like I expect it might. Like I was hoping it would. Okay, it looks like it is.
Cool.
I don't know what happens if somebody like chats with us. Do we hear about it or
Oh, interesting. You
because I don't
can, I
think we'll
guess,
hear
keep an
about
eye on
it.
the YouTube
Yeah,
comments
in
or something.
this. Yeah. I was doing kind of a side by side with. Oh yeah, you looked at StreamYard as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was trying to do side by side to understand like StreamYard versus Riverside, and one of the things on Riverside is the like I'm looking at the stream right now on YouTube, and it's a little bit like kind of blah. Like it just kind of looks like I don't know, like the raw kind of mechanical bits are streaming out. It doesn't look like a composed shot so much.
Yeah.
Um, but it's got that marking feature.
Yeah. That'll be useful, I think.
Okay, so now that we've got this working, so I think
You
we were
could try
talking
it.
about.
Did you say you had a... Oh, yeah, go ahead. Intro it first. Then I had an idea.
No, that's all right. Oh, about
On
you were
Lex.
going down the direction of.
Yeah. So I thought we could try opening up Lex, and you were saying you were working on a video concept or doing some writing this morning. You could pop that in and see what comes out. Did you see
Ooh, I
the...
don't. That's scary. I don't know if I want to reveal all my.
Oh, that's
inner
true. It would reveal
thinking.
your cards. Well, you can
Maybe
just riff on like a new concept
what I
or
did
something.
yesterday.
Yeah,
Maybe the
yeah.
one I did yesterday. I've at least
Yeah,
some
do
notes
that.
from that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one. So
Because I
why
saw
don't I do this?
Nathan tweet yesterday about using Lex to brainstorm a new article topic. Let me try to find this tweet storm. But
Okay,
that
well,
was
you do
kind of
this.
cool.
I'm gonna go into sharing mode and see if this all kind of does roughly what we hope or expect. Can you see my screen yet? No, it's still.
It's still loading.
Huh. Wouldn't have guessed that would take that long.
There.
Okay. So you can see Lex now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, sorry, so you were saying something that we should do with this? Or.
Well, I texted you on Signal this tweet that Nathan posted yesterday. That was kind of cool.
Oh, okay.
He was saying that he was brainstorming ideas for his weekly column and didn't feel like he had anything exciting, so he used Ask Lex to chat with the AI about it, and then he linked this transcript.
And so Ask Lex is a feature within Lex? Is
Yeah.
it like kind of the brainstorming part?
Yeah, I think last time I checked it was like a sidebar, but let me open it up and see.
So I'm new to Lex, but I think you've used it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And what have you found? Does it feel? I see a lot of people tweeting about it and how they find it, useful and helpful to the writing process. But I don't. I think in my mind, it's basically just like throw some stuff in and get GPT-3 out. Is that roughly what it is, or is there something else going on here?
Yeah, so it's like a Google Doc interface, and you can write, and then if you hit Command Return, I think, it'll like generate the next few lines for you. And then I think there's the Ask Lex feature where you can kind of use it as a little research assistant. So if you're like, what was the state of nuclear energy in 1970 or something, I think it'll like look it up for you. Or the Nathan Tweetstorm, I think, was what should I write about kind of thing.
Right.
So yeah, I asked it this, and then it tells me nuclear energy in 1970 was in a state of development. They were first being built, and there was a lot of research. There was a lot of public opposition to nuclear energy. So I don't know. It's like that's kind of a vague answer, but you could probably dig in and use it as a little shortcut tool for Googling something in more depth later on.
Okay, so I popped over on Lex right now. This is kind of my unboxing moment. So I just got logged in, and I've got invites up here. I've got my documents in progress or archived, and they've got a few, I guess 6 sort of getting started type things. So welcome, how to use, using on mobile, the roadmap, motivation, and getting the most. So let's start at the beginning. Welcome to Lex. So it's basically word processor plus sentence completion. So I've played with a lot of these GPT-3, and it looks like that's what they're using here. So a lot of these tools that sort of take GPT-3 and, extend language with it. So is that roughly what we're getting here? Is there some, it's kind of like an interface to GPT-3?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So you have untitled, generate a title idea. Needs a little bit more text. Okay, fair enough. How about today's video topic? How about today's startup video topic?
Maybe you have to put text in the body section.
A title. Yeah. How about what should today's startup video be about? So maybe I'll remove this, or I forget what it said at the beginning.
So you see that head on the upper left?
Thing? The head? Not this thing.
No, like on the toolbar? Yes. You can ask there, I think.
I'm the Lex AI. How can I help? I'm good at research questions, but sometimes I make things up. I don't know anything that happened after June 2021. Okay. Okay, fair enough. Okay.
Say what topics should I talk about?
So do you know when it looks like when it submits this question, it maintains the context that we're talking about startup videos, which is it's one of the things that I think Brian Christian mentioned in The Most Human as something that a lot of AIs are not that good at.
Maintaining context over time.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the ways that you can prove you're a human is if you can maintain context, because a lot of AIs don't maintain context well.
Yeah.
Include the problem that startup solving, team behind the startup, unique value prop. Okay, these are all actually pretty reasonable. I mean, they're kind of like, I'd say they're like reasonable. Maybe if you're stuck, they could help you get unstuck. You can make videos about startups. I'm interested in generative AI and a bunch of traditional startup topics. Okay. So it still doesn't have enough to go. The AI needs a bit more text. Into generative AI and a bunch of traditional startup topics. I've been playing with ways to generate text, images, and video using various tools like DALL-E 2 Stable Diffusion, and Midjourney. Okay, how about that? Nope. So I'm a little bit like, okay, Lex AI is like an ask answer thing, and then this is my document. I'm a little bit like not sure when to use one versus when to use the other. Like, I guess it's just like an interactive version of the same thing. But like, is Ask Lex observing what it sees in the doc, or is it?
Oh, I'm not sure about that. But if you press Command Enter on the doc, I wonder what it'll say.
So you said Command Enter on the doc? Oh. Okay.
And if you do it at different points, like if you do it after Midjourney, see what it says. I wonder how it's different.
So Command Enter, that's like a hotkey that means
fill in something.
This is just pulled some. It pulled some random text. You can find me on Twitter.
I wonder who that is. Who's that D. Kleiman?
Uh-oh. Failed to load.
Oh, maybe it just made that up. Maybe it just made you a new domain.
Really? You think this is not real, huh? That'd be funny if it's not. David Kleiman.
Wow, it definitely just kind of made that up, though. I don't think he's the CEO of Drift.
What is Drift? Okay. Is there a generative chatbot? So we can figure out if did this pull this from
something that actually, like a paragraph that actually exists online?
Yeah, I mean...
Looks like it's not.
Yeah. I'm just curious if there's like a kind of... Oops. If there's like a pretty obvious path that it took to get here, or if it really had that kind of more, synthesized feel to it. So let's see if we throw D. Kleinman in there. Self-learning AI chatbot. Okay. Sure. Well, this doesn't seem to really... This doesn't help. This particular insertion doesn't seem to help the process, right? So I guess I can just get rid of that. Okay, so today's startup video should be about how to generate text. That seems like reasonable because I kind of told it I'm into that. I'm trying to think like...
If you paste something that we wrote like from our Boneyard piece, just paste like a chunk of it in, and as if we were in progress writing that, and see what it says after. Because I feel like it's best when it has more material like in progress.
Right. Okay, so what if we just take the first paragraph? Like, let's say we just wrote a banger of a first paragraph, and then we wanted it to write the rest of it. So I'm going to erase all this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Lex, write the rest of our article. Generate title ideas. So it's only trying to generate the title with this. So is that command enter thing that you mentioned, is that the main way that you have it do insertions? Okay.
Yeah. Kind of interesting. Hit it again. I wonder what it says.
Next. Yeah.
Wow. It's plausible.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I don't believe that like a machine has figured out that nuance, right? It must have pulled this from that concept. Maybe it was able to identify that concept somewhere online. Like not necessarily that
Interesting.
sequence of words, but like I think it probably somebody had probably written about the concept of
Flickr.
Flickr being focused on photo sharing but not social interactions, but they might have said it in a different way.
Yeah. So you think it kind of
So I think what it's doing is it's
searches
abstracting
and
it
then
into like the
re-summarize?
concepts. I think it's
Yeah.
something like that, so that it's not actually using your, it's not like plagiarizing from a specific sequence of words, right?
Yeah.
Instagram and Snapchat were built from the ground up as social networks. Yeah, I find that credible. So this,
What's the bottom now?
did you use sudo write at all?
I didn't much. I did a little bit. Yeah, I'm curious about
So
the comparison.
The thing that kind of felt really special to me about what I did here is that it was meant to be fiction, so I kind of knew I was just making stuff up. So I just wrote this paragraph just for like just sort of randomly, but it was meant to be fiction. I wasn't trying to write like a blog post. So I was just like, oh, I'll set a scene. But then it came up with all of these like fictional different directions to go down. And like in the fiction domain, I think it's like, I think as a writer, I can be more forgiving when a fictional domain goes in a bunch of bizarre directions. It's kind of like, okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
And in this like more kind of bloggy information factual domain, I'm a little less certain of like what to expect or how to get started with it, I guess. Like, do I expect it to come up with novel ideas, or am I expecting it to like just give me a bunch of like branches that I could pursue? More like it's getting me started down
More like
branches
a
versus
writer's
actually...
block kind of solution.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was my experience with it. Like, it'll come up with things that you're like, oh, I guess that's a thought that could be true. And you could go that way.
Oh, this is cool. So you can highlight and unhighlight the AI written text. You can see what you wrote versus what it wrote.
Yeah.
And then is this just like inserting regular images? Is it doing stuff with these, or this is just like a general writing tool then, right?
Yeah.
Does this does this logo remind you of Ted?
A little bit, yeah.
Ted Lex. I like the name Lex.
Yeah, it's a really good name. It's a fun
Okay,
way
so
to play with it, though. Like, you
welcome
can take an article that you like or something that exists online and then see what it would have done.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I was talking about this article from Elad, right, about kind of how to divide up the equity of a company.
Oh, yeah, I
So
wonder
let me
if
see
you
if
paste that in.
I'm going to paste that in here. Let's see. So I should actually grab some of the text. Okay. doing a horrible job at window management here. Okay. Are we back? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's some of the stuff, and so I go generate me more. Huh.
Are those true?
I think kind of closely, yeah. But these aren't from the article, right? These are just sort of...
It generated more?
This may be... Okay, sorry, I'm still struggling with this. So I think it got the concept, and then this notable companies with two equally dominant co-founders. I mean, Airbnb had Joe, Brian, and Nathan, so there are three. But I do think they were kind of more in the, equal dominance in their domains.
Yeah.
Sergey and Larry were, nominally equally dominant, but I think Larry always was more dominant.
Mm-hmm.
In eBay, I mean, Pierre was the original founder. Jeff Skoll, I think, joined later as a CEO or something. And then I don't know the specifics on the GitHub situation. But I would bet that that sounds probably right to me, would be my guess. So I don't know where that came from. But it does seem to have kind of, some amount of understanding of the concept, and then started to bring, newish ideas into that. But
yeah.
So I'm wondering where it came up with those concepts. So if we search GitHub dominant founder, because those are kind of the concepts it's playing with. I mean, it's kind of good that it's not really obvious to me where this came from. So it's not like
Yeah. You can't just reverse Google it, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
curious what's going on there.
Cool. Well, I think it'll be fun. We can talk to Nathan more about it tomorrow. It'll be fun. We can catch up with him and hear what he's been up to. Because I guess I think it's been a few years since we talked to him, but I was kind of, meaning when we talked to him on a live stream.
Yeah.
But I was kind of under the impression that he was kind of building tooling for like the news org, right?
Yeah.
And this is more of a generalized product, right? Not necessarily focused just on like making his news org more efficient, but sort of more general writer's tool.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if that was
curious,
like when he started working on that, or was that some other concept and then he got excited about this. There's a lot to dig in on there.
Yeah, well, his news org seems like it could be just pretty, as a news or media org, it seems like that could be a successful endeavor on its own, but it's different than like a product, platform product focused company on writing. And so how you structure that and how you build a team around that and how you finance it and everything is kind of, I would guess, very different.
Yeah.
Probably like a writing tool.
Yeah.
Is, kind of a shoot the moon type, endeavor. Whereas like the media org is probably brick by brick, you write things, you build audience, and you build monetization around that, and you build a network of writers, and kind of a little bit more brick by brick, let's say.
Yeah, it's cool to kind of use probably observations he had, just making himself and everyone was writing so much, and build that into, like, peel that out from the specific context of news. Because you could probably use this for fiction too. It sounds like pseudo-write is probably more helpful for, like, conceptualizing different characters and, like, storylines in the way that, like, a novelist might think of stuff. Right now, this is more like fill in the next bit. But
right.
Yeah, it definitely is not, like, localized to just blogging or just news.
Right.
Yeah.
And, like, if it's going to, I mean, I think my biggest questions on it are how does the, so GPT-3 is the large language model available via an API from OpenAI, right? And then things like Lex, or, we looked at pseudo-write, or I think even like Jasper, or these other, copy AI and stuff. They're all basically like experiences dependent today on GPT-3. So most of the magic is done by the platform underlying, and then they're providing like a UX on top of that. And I kind of wonder, what are the hypotheses around how you build more value at the application layer here? Right? Because the magic trick of you can put in text and GPT-3 comes up with something clever and interesting is a cool trick, and it might be useful in the near term, but like that part is either the platform owns that and they'll build that writing tool, or thousands of people build that same writing tool, and so it's hard to, I think, build something like unique in the space if most of your magic is by a different, provided to you by a different layer. So it's like, what is the set of things you build around this to make it its own layer, to
That's
create
a good
value at the application
question.
layer?
Yeah, what could that be? Because I feel like so far we have seen easier UX or ways to plug into it if you're not going to deal with the core GPT-3 collaboration features. I think Lex has collaboration features, but still, like, other people could build that in too, probably. But yeah, what else would push it?
So this is, Jasper, I don't know if you followed this one, but
Yeah.
here's their breaking news: $125 million Series A, Chrome extension, blah, blah, blah. So they've got a bunch of stuff going on here. And I think my guess is what works here is not that, they're building necessarily a lot of custom models, at least not yet, but that they have packaged this thing and gone out and sold it. So they, I guess here's the product. So if you're on a marketing team, this interface is, they went out and sold this, and this interface is baked into your workflow for how you do business now. And so
yeah,
GPT-3
it's like very specialized
made
per platform.
Jasper.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then you're kind of in the business of, okay, I'm going to, build stuff that's more custom to a use case, and I'm going to go out and sell that use case to those people. And then maybe over time, you're going to differentiate by differentiating a model that is specific to those use cases, or specific to some of the users, maybe even.
Yeah.
So it's not so much a ding on people who are just playing with the models. I think, just playing with the platforms is, I think, an interesting starting point, but it seems like you need a hypothesis about where does it go and how do you build more value at the layer you're operating.
Right. Like develop a version, not instead of using GPT-3, make the like Instagram predictive text writer or something, like bespoke for that use case. Or you think of something else?
Well,
just as an example, but like, is it kind of like specialize the model and stop using the like general model, or is it more add things that are not just predictive text that are super unique?
I guess like in the case of Jasper, I think they have built out a suite of tooling that maybe gets into the workflow of of a, let's say, I don't know, a social media marketing manager or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know for sure that that's what it is, but I think they're doing something that's a little bit more specific, and then they have a specific customer they can sell that to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like if you just connected GPT-3 to like Instagram or something, that's still kind of very horizontal, and you haven't necessarily carved out. Now that might be a fine starting point, but I think you still have to figure out how are we going to carve out value at the layer you're operating. Because if you're just the glue that attaches thing X to thing Y, that could be fine for a starting point, but you either have to say there's going to be like, thousands of X's and thousands of Y's, so you're going to become like this important switching station for those, or it's not about those. It's not about like diversity of connections and becoming a marketplace for those connections, but rather you're going to build some other kind of layer at that, or other kind of value at that layer. And that could be something like, a model specific to the use case.
Mm-hmm.
So start with GPT-3, but every social media marketing manager likes to frame things in way X or Y, or this is what works. This is what has higher click-throughs and conversions, and maybe there's a whole conversion tracking dashboard that spits out GPT-3, kind of stuff, but then it actually gets the conversion data from the channels where you're marketing.
So that part's not on you. That's interesting, because there are tools that I've seen, like, I can't remember the names now, but basically you plug them into your Google Docs and they will show you like your SEO score and the breakdown, like how many times you use different keywords. Oh, you should use this one less, you should use this one more. And it's sort of like a writer dashboard tool that you can plug into Google. But yeah, if you were just using GPT-3, then you would have to like go paste that in somewhere else and then get that data. And you're saying just like, what's the next decision that I have to make as a writer? Make it for me, or like make it easier for me to make.
Yeah. And I guess if you're just like the idea of general writer as a kind of archetype of customer is attractive because it's so broad, but it's also like kind of unattractive because it doesn't speak to anybody in particular and doesn't give you enough depth to serve specific archetypes. And so, this isn't meant as a negative. It's more just meant to be like, okay, start with something very broad because it's like, hack it together and you get something going. But then like kind of where does it go, I think is important. And it's not clear to me that, you like maybe this whole idea of maybe there's like, let's say, for example, in the case of Lex and Every, there's a voice, like an editorial voice that Every likes to speak with. And probably like the large language model, the general large language models that like, OpenAI is going to provide are not going to necessarily focus on, articulating the voice across a set of a dozen accounts and sort of synthesizing or building the feedback loops to define the voice within the context of what everyone wants. And so maybe just the idea of like, there's 12 people on a team. We want to synthesize a consistent voice across all of that writing. And it like DK and Mishti can write something, but if it goes through the Every processor, then it comes out sounding like a consistent feel, almost like what the job of like
That's
an editor
interesting.
at the New York Times, right?
Yeah. Or you could do it like make me sound like John Steinbeck or something. Like maybe you feed it in your tonal inspirations and then it spits like
in the style
your text, but like in the style of that. That's interesting. Yeah. It's kind of you're differentiating the actual process of producing the content with the process of like thinking about its reception and like publication more. And then the latter, it sounds like the latter is what hasn't really been done so much with the tooling that we've seen so far, but something that helps like optimize for SEO or like write in a tone that fits this publication, or if you're writing a political speech, it analyzes like the most persuasive tweets by all Democrats and like gets those themes in your speech or whatever it is. But it's like more about the delivery than necessarily the actual pure content of the text that hasn't been poked on so much.
And something that kind of like there's some, if you sort of really think about edges or interfaces, there's like an interface to the large language model that's going to be available to everybody. So if you're only providing that through your own interface, but not building additional value, like, trying to understand voice within a political, sphere, like you're mentioning, or, doing, or maybe like I mentioned sort of the idea of like tracking conversions and input text, push it out to another system, track the conversion and use that to drive more input text. Something like that to me feels like you're getting deeper on a use case, and you're dispatching GPT-3 in a new way. You're deciding when to dispatch it because of how the conversion data works or something like that, where like your system is providing the feedback between the conversion data and like, give me new large language model text based on this one that was already converting well. Now let's get a dozen more and see if they can even convert better. But you're kind of like helping explore that kind of add creative writing and conversion tracking process. Like that's a deeper problem than like, serving any writer in the world. Probably not the problem that Lex wants to solve, but that feels like the kind of thing that at least you're building more depth in that space.
Yeah, totally. It's like zooming out to the earlier discussions about AI people had, where like you could teach a computer to be really good at chess by just brute force, like making it read every single chess move possible, or like what you're talking about is more like try something, see the reception, learn, adjust. That was kind of a later step that a lot of those systems took, but a lot more interesting because it's a lot more customizable.
Right. And in chess, you actually have very clear feedback loops around scoring. Like each player, white or black, can be scored on the board, and you can actually figure out a score of what is sort of like the best next move. In I think they're fairly objective ways, though they're not always perfectly correct.
Do it more for poker or something where you have to like monitor more dynamic environments. Like that's kind of the tweet example too. You're not right. I mean, there's some objective scores, like if GPT-3 or whatever X program uses GPT-3 to write you a tweet and then pushes it to Twitter, it probably can measure like impressions and likes and stuff, but then maybe there's some intangible stuff there as well, like what's the tone of a comment that you're getting back, or I don't know. It's still not as hard, I think, probably as like being an expert at poker, but getting closer to that than chess, probably.
Right.
That's cool. Wow. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that, but it seems like so obvious now that you say it, that that's the next step that these tools are going to have to take.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody who's looking at new products and companies in this area are asking these questions because it's like there's such a disconnect between how obviously exciting these things are, but sort of at what layer that excitingness occurs, or like sort of what layer that is generating the exciting bits of it.
Yeah, I think that's really good content for discussions and videos also for you, because I think a lot of people are excited, like, whoa, GPT-3 is so cool. Like that hasn't really worn off yet, but it's kind of like and then what could happen that people aren't thinking about as much, or like three layers down of like, and then what? And you brought up like one of those areas, but there's probably lots of examples of that maybe like sophisticated AI investors are thinking about, but other people aren't quite yet, including founders, I bet. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. It's funny because the patterns repeat again and again, I'd say, and there's always like there's always like a lot of energy created by some amount of magic or surprise that you can do that. Like I didn't know you could do that, and then that which was surprising, there's some like certain, maybe it's a year or two or a few years where there's almost like an arbitrage available to just serve that surprising thing, and you'll get a lot of tailwinds. But ultimately, you need to figure out, like, are you able to sort of harness some of that surprise into something that is kind of custom, that's sort of your version of that surprise? Like, meaning, think like, the invention of the digital camera and the simplicity of getting photos uploaded to the internet that was kind of like a big deal. Like it
Yeah.
sounds like ridiculous today, 20 years later, but like, I'd say things like Hot or Not actually grew up in that era when it was like, kind of, it came just to the right time when it moved from being really hard to get a digital image of yourself online to becoming relatively easy, or at least like more accessible or possible to many more people.
Mm-hmm.
And now that arbitrage is obviously so long gone, we don't even think of it. We take hundreds of photos every day and publish tons of them, and it's just like not even a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we've got this arbitrage moment right now where it's like, oh, you can do that thing? That's weird. I didn't know you could do that. And you got to imagine 10 years from now, everything's like, yeah, okay, fine. Computer generated a bunch of text. Cool. It all makes sense. It's all creative. I get it. It's going to feel boring to us at some point.
Yeah.
And so try to project forward when it finally feels boring to you that computers write human-like text. What is going to be the residual value? What are going to be the companies that are serving the use cases at that point?
That's a great question. That's a great framing, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because also, like, thinking about photography, and I think there's a little bit of this, like, oh no moment happening right now, too. Because probably when digital cameras came out, people were like, oh no, now everyone will have a really nice camera in their pocket, and, like, the
right.
whole, like, business of photography is dead. So I hear this so much that, like, oh crap, like, now writers are going to be out of business or whatever.
Right.
Which, in most cases, I don't think is actually true, but it's just, like, what your value prop is will probably have to evolve and become a lot more specific. Like, just taking a nice picture of a sunset is not impressive anymore because everyone can do that every day. But, like, do you stitch that together in some interesting compilation over the course of, like, a year of forest fires and, like, make it into a climate story? Like, that kind of stuff will always be interesting, but it's like more about the overall synthesis and presentation of a story.
Right. It's funny, and I see this all the time, especially in my TikTok comments, where people are like, you're stealing jobs from artists, and, like, what about the real artists? And it's like, it's a common refrain, but I actually have no sympathy for that idea. I have sympathy for the people whose lives are being changed and you have to sort of adapt. But I think, all of life is adaptation. And so, there's nothing that's ever, you can't just show up and do what you did yesterday and get the same result. That's just like feature of the world, our biological underpinnings, the need to aggregate energy in the universe. There's like some really fundamental things that I don't think are going to change. So adaptation is like super important. And so when people say, oh, like, what about, what are the real artists going to do? It's like, I don't know, like, probably, like, did Photoshop kill the real artists? I don't think so. I think Photoshop empowered a lot of artists. Yeah. But, like, if your main craft was silver halide darkroom photo development, you probably need to adapt. You probably need to figure out something else that you're good at. And silver halide darkroom photo development is kind of like a quaint bygone era relic. It's like maybe somebody does it to be old timey, but, like, that's not a feature of the world that's super valuable today. And it was, probably 30, 40 years ago. Yeah. Even
and it could be, if the story of, like, you is compelling enough, I think, as an artist, then it becomes more about, like, developing your own persona. If I somehow make it, like, really compelling that I have the story and there's a reason that I'm into this old time technique and, like, I'm, like, culturally relevant in some way, or, like, pushing on some, like, emotional theme for people, then people will care, but not by virtue of the fact that it exists alone.
Right. And I don't think we can just push back to, to eras when it did exist and recall those as being, like, the right way for the universe to be organized. It's just like, we have new tools. We're going to constantly develop new tools. We all have to adapt to figure out how to use those tools and how to use those tools to make a contribution to, society, humanity, capitalism, whatever you want to contribute to. But you have to figure out,
and there's a very optimistic lens you can take on it. Yeah.
Totally.
Like, not you're taking away artists' jobs, but, like, think of how many people never thought that they were artists or thought they could be artists, but maybe with, like, a little bit of nudging, they realize maybe Photoshop did this for a lot of people who weren't, like, so dexterous with, like, oil painting on a brush. But how many
Totally.
people will realize that like the word art is much broader than they thought, and could actually include them? I think that's
Yeah.
just like such a positive thing.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's like it's enabling more human creativity, not restricting. It's taking it out of the hands of the high priests of creativity and it's putting it in the hands of
Yeah,
everybody. Now you
yeah,
see like what now you unleash humanity to really let creativity go from like thought to execution faster.
yeah.
And now more people have access to it. I was talking actually again on the TikTok comments. There was somebody who was complaining about this, and I was kind of pointing it out. It's almost like journalism went through this, where it's like, well, what about the real journalists? Where are we going to get the real facts from? Like the people who do all the research. It's like, well, sometimes the news orgs are problematic in that they, controlled distribution and controlled journalists and made them say things that were consistent with what the people at the top or the capital or the distribution system around them wanted to do. And now you actually have a different world, very different world, very different problems. But now you actually empower everybody to be a journalist. Some people will become trustworthy journalists. Some people will not, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
that same thing, like everybody can be a journalist, I think is a net good for the world instead of like we only reserve journalism for corporations who own a bunch of distribution and have a bunch of capital to employ journalists. I think that's not that's not the one and only true kind of journalism, as I think people like to suggest it might be. I think there's a lot of different flavors of journalism, just like I think there's a lot of different flavors of artists and creation and creativity. And the more you can empower more people, the better.
Yeah, and you can and should still have, I think, bodies of like accreditation based on different people's taste or standards, and then people can choose which ones to give more or less credence to, and maybe that won't be the same for everyone. But you still have like, I don't know, the Nobel Prize for literature or the Pulitzer
Yep.
Prize for investigative reporting, like these kinds of things. And then there's also things that came into existence much more recently than those, but it's
Yep.
not a total free for all, because I mean I could make the Mishti Prize for vlogging or
Yeah.
something. Probably no one will care, but if I try hard enough, maybe people will care in like 10 years. And then yeah, I think anyone who has taste can either like develop that kind of taste or reward that kind of taste with these
Totally.
new creative tools.
Totally. And the Nobel Prize was just something that somebody made up, right? It's
Yeah.
like just because it existed before we were born doesn't mean it's just a property of the universe. It's just something we're
Yeah.
familiar with, right? So
Yeah.
you could make the Mishti Prize for vlogging, and maybe 10 years from now, it is the go-to, criterion. It's the standard by which everybody is judged because Mishti has spent the 10 years building trust in her voice, and she's not going to shill crappy vloggers. She's only going to show the stuff that she thinks is good. So I think that's
Yeah.
like actually that's what's exciting about this whole like
Yeah.
anybody can do anything. Just go for it.
Let's do stuff. Yeah. That's awesome.
Do more stuff.
Do more stuff.
Live
Be less
stream like
scared.
no one's watching.
Yeah.
Because in fact nobody's watching.
Exactly.
There's one watching now, and I think it's me because I have that browser open.
Oh, awesome. It's good to keep an eye on yourself. Well, this was super
I'm my
fun.
greatest fan.
Yeah.
Yep.
I should run, but I enjoyed this, and
Cool.
we'll have a lot of stuff to
Yeah.
push on with Nathan tomorrow or whenever we end up doing that.
Yeah, that'll be good. All right, cool.
All right,
Thanks for hanging.
cool. See ya.
See you, Mishti. Bye-bye.